Brandon was chained to his typewriter. Or rather, he'd like to think he was. Even the romantic notion of writer's block had long gone out the window. In truth, Brandon let his typewriter collect dust as he spent his waking hours hunched over his laptop, a cursor blinking back at him. The blank screen gave him more nightmares than a blank sheet of paper. Paper you can tear, paper you can scrawl on, paper you can make a million notations on in red. But the blank white void of a new document drove Brandon to distraction. Any distraction. Brandon was holed up in an apartment from which he hoped his escapist fantasies would offer him the same flight. People say, write what you know, but Brandon feared no one wanted a novel or a comic book or a movie about a man who consumes 10 espressos a day and stares at a blinking cursor. A coffee break for Brandon was not drinking coffee. But did anyone want to see a monster movie with a creature consisting of fair trade beans? Probably not. Even so, Brandon would break up the daily process of not writing by making coffees with his espresso machine. Loading the pods was the highlight of his day. He imagined that they were messages from Mission Command, that he was an astronaut in a space station of procrastination, and these coffee pods contained vital information from ground control. Sadly, this was not the case. Brandon was a daydreamer at school and would frequently be told off when staring out of the window. Now he was older and there were no teachers checking on him. He could look out of his window all day long, and he did. Looking out of the window was now the main skill on his resume. He knew there was a world out there, but he knew he had to come up with a more exciting one in his mind. The great sci-fi writers were amazing world builders, but all Brandon's attempts to find new exciting lands were beset by snowstorms and detours into a horrible void, the blinding white void of his laptop screen. Long drives looking for inspiration would send him in narrative circles. He was as low on fuel as he was ideas. He would cut up the newspapers and create word salad, a mess of clippings all over the floor. He would throw Scrabble letters into the air and try to write even a sentence based on the words left behind. All this produced were a lot of hard-to-pronounce characters. Was Sergeant Caffin Fumph going to be a popular comic book character? No. Brandon's search engine was his trusty servant, an unstoppable locomotive of ideas. But even this seemed to have crashed. Brandon would often flick through his thesaurus, but in truth, he liked saying thesaurus more than he actually used it. It conjured images of awesome dinosaurs made of words and synonyms. Could they be monsters in his story? A stampede of prehistoric thesauri. It wasn't exactly Michael Crichton, was it? The random interjections had to work sometime. He had to do something, anything to break the dam in his brain. An infinite number of monkeys were out there somewhere coming up with Shakespeare and kicking his arse. His phone was always just within reach, of course, a tempting diversion of endless trivia and avian catapulting. But it was a long time since it had been used for its original function. A long time since he had rung out, and even longer since someone had rung him. His publisher, his girl, his mother had all given up on him. The only times it vibrated were when a train went past. He didn't even hear his own voice that much anymore. A dictaphone lay next to his computer, but the ideas that he'd left on there, blinking zero. The legal pad was bare too, no scribbles in black. It was just yellow, lined, and no more. Maybe 11 espressos would do the trick. 12? What about 13? 13 was unlucky for Brandon. On that fateful 13th espresso, Brandon blacked out. Or should that be browned out? Brandon passed out in a puddle of his own caffeine intake, hunched over his laptop, his head pressed against the keys. And then the dreams came. That night, Brandon saw dark creatures coming to get him. Or was he chasing himself? Even his dreams were murky. He imagined drowning in his own espresso. A shallow way to die, but a rich, caramelly one too. And then he was awake. Wasn't he? He knew he'd been out for a long time. The sun was upon him. That only happened once a morning. 10:30 a.m. was when the shadow of the window pane would fall across his table. He called this Dracula o'clock. But today, the hour of the vampire felt different. Very different. For today, there was text on his screen. Text that must have been written while his face was pressed against the keys. But it was too good. Too eloquent. Could he have written it himself in the midst of a black coffee blackout? Not only that, his dictaphone was blinking, but with a much higher number than 0. He didn't remember leaving all those ideas, nor did he remember drawing the creature on his notepad. Was Brandon still a slave to his writer's block, or had something burst the dam while he was asleep? This was all one big question mark, and in his own handwriting. He didn't remember the scrawlings, the scribblings, or the ramblings. Who had written that prose on his laptop? Who had left him the dictaphone messages? Who had drawn that creature on the pad? And who were these voicemails from? Brandon looked out of the window, but this morning everything felt different. There was indeed a world out there, but it wasn't one that seemed familiar anymore. This brand new morning brought a brand new world, one that felt both familiar and utterly strange. Brandon asked himself some questions. Was his world building without him? Was he in control of his own creations? And who could help him now? Maybe you.